Alright guys, welcome back to Alfheim, the very last time-lapse video, although not the last video of Alfheim, and hopefully also not the last video of Alfheim today. Today I'm gonna work on, well, in this video I should probably say, in this video I'm gonna work on the path elements, and what I wanted to actually do with these time-lapses is that even though this is just a fraction of what I'll be doing to finish this ride, I did want to give a good impression of like the general things that I did to finish it. So like most of the things that I have done will be featured in this video, just not all of it. So like I'm making fences over here, except this time-lapse doesn't show the making of all of the fences all over the park, but this is more or less like the approach that I took with it. Making fences and path elements is one of the things I wanted to get in here. I also wanted to get into the scenery around the roller coaster itself. Just for space reasons, I didn't want to get into making large buildings for the coasters to go through or interact with. There's just barely any space to do that kind of idea, and I wanted to actually keep much of this area quite open since I have a couple of sight lines that I really want to preserve. But you know, some general theming to make it a bit more interesting than just empty rocks and foliage. So as you can see, the kind of thing that I wanted to get into is some steps and stairs and wooden catwalks and supports, all sorts of things that can pretty much be built around and underneath and interacting with the coaster kind of scenery. And that is basically what I'll be going for quite a bit here. If you might actually remember the old Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 times, there's a coaster called Alfheim, which is, well, my favorite Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 coaster, well, second favorite I should say, of all time. It's a really amazing coaster, and it has a lot of amazing interaction with catwalks and all sorts of wooden scenery on the ground, and it's that kind of idea which I want to go for a bit in here as well. But there's also some other coaster scenery interaction. One really interesting thing is actually some waterfalls underneath the coaster tracks, which I'll get to later in this video and talk about how and why I wanted to do it as well. Now, one of the other things that I also wanted to get into is some different fence designs. Like, obviously I wanted to get the fence design in with the driftwood planks, since they're just really useful to make different things out of. But I also wanted to get a fence design which is quite similar actually to the fences around Nemesis and Alton Towers. Just kind of like the ironwork fences that are designed to keep you out of the parts where the coaster track goes, but with a more wooden elvish-ish look to it. That's the idea behind these. I mean, generally, there's an important reason why you would see fences like this in real life and why you see them around Nemesis. Like, if I didn't have these fences around here, people would very easily just be able to walk onto the track or the area where the track goes, and since the track comes really close to the paths here, but also because there are many dips and valleys which you can fall into, like this valley over here with the Junior Immelman elements, it's just really dangerous to have your people go around everywhere, and that's why realistically I wanted to add some safety elements like the fences around here. So in a way the fences have kind of a double function, since they're for one just a realistic safety function, but they also just make the area look a bit nicer. They're part of the scenery as well, and that's why I wanted to make them look like this and not just go with very simple ironwork fences or something that kind of breaks the theme. It's one of these things also where I guess this coaster kind of drifts between fantasy and reality, since, you know, the scenery over here is just way too expensive for a real theme park to ever decide to put that much money into just two dueling coasters on such a large amount of area. But on the other hand, I did want to like keep some rules of, well, a degree of realism to this, aside from all the elven magic that allows me to go for the ridiculous theming at some points. And so I did still want to add like some safety measures. The coaster layouts in general, I would say, are pretty realistic, except maybe for the lack of mid-course brake run, which you would kind of like to see in a coaster with this length, and the fact that they're Jovanola inverts, and Jovanola doesn't even exist anymore. But you know, in general I wanted to keep some theme park rules and keep some rules of realism in here, while at the same time just pretty much giving myself a wild card with the scenery to kind of, you know, do more ridiculous things than I would normally do when I try to keep it realistic and try to keep many things smaller and less all over the place than I would normally do. Same goes for foliage too, actually. The foliage is kind of unrealistic in a sense that it's very varied. There's this sort of idea, I think, that many people have, is that foliage is the best when it's like really abundant, really varied, with as much of different colors and shrubs as you can find. But from a realism standpoint, I would normally actually like to avoid that, especially when it comes to flowers. You can see me adding flowers just about every corner of the roller coaster in this case, but in realistic cases, I would kind of say it's better to avoid doing it, since in the end, some workers of the park are gonna have to flower all of those flowers, and they're gonna have to be planted and cared for. So you normally just find flower beds in very close to the path and very maintainable areas, but over here I kind of just wanted to go a bit more interesting with the foliage as well. And pretty much the only thing that I wanted to do with the foliage is make it look as cool as and interesting as possible. And while I wanted to keep it quite realistic, so no enormous elven trees or anything like that, I do feel it kind of adds to the magical feeling of the entire valley to have many flowers and very varied and dense foliage around the ride. In the end, one of the ideas that I kind of feel the ride carries is this sort of elven village in the middle of the forest that's kind of hidden. You don't really see it from the general surrounding, well, except for the castle, that is, but it's like a kind of hidden elven village that, you know, doesn't just exist within the forest, but it kind of, you know, kind of moves with the forest, if that makes any sense. It's kind of part of the forest almost, and that's why I wanted to have like really dense foliage around this part, and also have very dense foliage around all of the houses that I have, as well as, you know, the many hanging baskets and flower boxes and planters that I have around the buildings as well. Now moving on to some different detail, which also very much provides a safety function while at the same time being an interesting part of scenery. What you often see in real life coasters underneath tracks as they pass over paths is coaster nets, to just avoid people from dropping things out of the coaster onto the path below the coaster and potentially onto people's heads. So it's a very common safety feature, and it's something that I, well, can't really have in here since coaster nets aren't part of the game. At least I've seen them on the lift hill, but not actually whenever they pass over paths. Would actually be a really interesting feature in the game now when I come to think of it. But I wanted to have something similar over here since the coaster passes like really straight over the path here. I figured it would be quite nice to add a coaster net-like function with that wooden overhang over the path, and it also makes the interaction between the path and the track a little bit more interesting, I think. Now, speaking of interesting things, this is one of my favorite parts of the ride in the end, even though it's a really simple feature and I didn't even really come up with it. Over here I wanted to have like a really interesting dive into this drop here, because these drops for both coasters are into the deepest point of the roller coaster, or at least the fastest point of the roller coaster, and they are going into the looping, which is like, you know, it signifies the halfway point of both coasters, and I think it's just the most visible and interesting parts of the layout of these coasters, where they kind of go into the deepest, fastest part of the layout and split ways after that. So I wanted to make the scenery over here a bit unique, though in a sense in the end it's not that unique, but like a very interesting dip into this very deep dive underneath the path. Now, what you might know if you know Nemesis in Alton Towers is that Nemesis at least used to have blood waterfalls running underneath its tracks, and as you dip into like the very deep valleys of Nemesis, there's this stream of blood that just, you know, finds its way underneath the track and that you really fly over very closely. And it's that kind of idea which I actually wanted to try over here as well, except for blood waterfalls I'm just choosing for regular waterfalls, because this is, you know, an elven village in the end. Want to keep it a little bit children friendly and a little bit nice as well, so some waterfalls. Besides, there is not even blood in the game yet, or there's not even blood. I'm not sure if they're really gonna add blood waterfalls to the game. I mean, it's not really the most commonly requested feature. But yeah, I wanted to have some waterfalls underneath the tracks here, just to provide like an interesting thing underneath you as you dive into this drop, which is really fast, and into these very deep points in the layout. And I figured the water VFX would work quite nicely for it. It's also very nice since I didn't really work with the VFX a lot until this point. Actually, I didn't work with the VFX at all, so I figured it would be nice to try those effects a little bit. I'm saying video effects, but they're just effects, I think, pretty sure. No, they call it VFX, right, we're going with VFX in that case, but I wanted to mess around with that a little bit as well, and I figured this would be a good opportunity to do so. And I was a bit skeptical at first, figuring that they are just water fountains, and they're supposed to be used for fountains, and they don't really have a lot of water coming out of it, and I wasn't really sure how good it would look as a flowing waterfall. But adding quite a few at like similar places, but switching up the location and the rotation of all the different water sprinklers here just a little bit to make it look like one very big wall of water worked pretty well to create the idea of a waterfall. And after that I just used the rocks to get rid of the pieces that don't look so good, where it's really clear that these are just you know, actual fountains, and make sure that the waterfalls feel more like they're falling over the rocks instead of just being waterfalls behind these rocks. Like, make sure that they're kind of worked into the rocks a little bit more and a little bit nicer. So that's the general idea behind placing these rocks. I wanted to place the, well, I'm not really sure what to call it, but I wanted to place the sewer-like entrance at the end, at the top of these waterfalls, just to make it look as if there is some sort of draining thing where the water is coming out. And at the bottom I'll be placing some wooden planks at the very bottom of this valley to make it also look as if the water at the end kind of escapes between the rocks, that kind of idea. And make sure that it actually looks like it's going somewhere. And I am quite happy actually with how it turned out in the end. Definitely quite positively surprised with how well these things actually work as waterfalls. It takes a lot of time to get their exact position right and make sure that everything around it works quite nicely to this idea. It's very easy to end up with waterfalls that like look very clearly fake and very clearly like they're just water fountains, and I tried to avoid that as much as I could here, and quite happy with the final result. Now moving over to the very final part of this video, which I won't completely be finishing because I stopped recording here for some reason, and in hindsight I'm not even entirely sure why I did so. I will be finishing these at some point in the future, but there is just no way that I am still going to record that. That would just be way too much of a time stress to get the time-lapse video out in time before I'm going to release the final video. So this is the last bit of time-lapse that you'll see of the park. I was basically still planning to have a facade over here, and the beginning of the making of that facade is seen over here, and something which I didn't do before but figured would be quite nice to actually use as a bit of a cheat to save some time here is to just take an existing building as a template, take the roof from that, since the roofs of many of the buildings are quite similar, and like the distinction in the buildings is mostly in the different details that I used for the pillars and windows and the general shape of the building. So I just took a roof and a few pillars from an existing building, just to save a bit of time and make my life a bit easier here. And that is gonna serve as the base for the new building over here, albeit with different details. And on the side of this building I'll have 3 different facades, and they're all just gonna connect into this one big sort of main street like building that I wanted to get in here, just to make this side of the park look a little bit more like an elven village as well, and also to actually get some functionality into this park, because at the moment there are no toilets or anything of that sort of thing. So I wanted to get some toilets in, and this is just a good opportunity to actually get some functionality into this park and actually allow the people of the park to go to the toilet, which is pretty nice and a pretty crucial feature. So there it goes, which is gonna sit in the building, which is gonna be right next to this building though. So yeah, even though I won't finish this facade in this video, you'll be able to see everything that I've made for this place and the rest of the park, which I won't be filming. A lot of what I won't be filming is a lot of foliage work, a lot of just placing trees on all these hills. It's not that interesting, I think. It's just, you know, in general finishing the final touches of the park and making sure that it's not located in this very big, empty, grassy Greenland. There are also some other things that I'll get into, like making the queues look nicer, adding some extra detail actually to like some of the other parts of the park, which I haven't focused on so much, like the entrance parts, or the parts around the queue, or the flat ride that I've had for quite a while already. And also just adding some final touches and tweaks to the existing things in the park, which doesn't really translate that well into a time-lapse anyway. And it's more or less that's everything that you're gonna miss with me not recording the final parts of making all of this. Now with that out of the way, there are a couple of things that I kind of want to talk about a little bit, because I haven't actually talked much about the competition that I am actually making this for. Basically, it's a competition from Frontier themselves. It's not that special, it's just a competition for the best video, and there will be like votes and a jury on what's gonna be the best video, and there's no real objective way to find out about it. And I'm basically more or less in it for the prize, which is really cool. It's a meet and greet with the Frontier staff in Cambridge, like a paid dinner. There's also a foundation stone, which for some reason they put first, but I'm not really sure if I'm really that interested in it. But yeah, it's a really awesome prize, which is why I'm giving it a try. But I've seen so many comments that I'm gonna win this contest for sure, and I kind of want to speak up against that, because I'm actually not expecting myself to win. And I'm not trying to say that just to be humble. I'm, well, trying to say that because I'm really not expecting myself to win, and I don't want to get all pissed when I don't end up winning. Because just in general, it's a contest for one. It's just not objective. Anyone can really win, and it's a lot about the creativity and, you know, what kind of new things or original things you're bringing to it as well. There's also just the fact that there's already this idea in general that I'm a favorite, and I see a lot of people saying that. And I think what actually makes the contest such an opportunity is that they're probably, I think, rolling this contest out to find some creators who don't get as much of a spotlight, who make amazing things but just aren't as well known for it. Like, if you've read the rules, they can actually use the footage from the contest entries for any promotional ways that they want to. So they're probably just looking in general too for, you know, a good way to find out what the community makes without having to go on big hunts for actually what people make. And I think in that way it would also be cool if the contest ends up, you know, bringing forward some of the people who aren't as well known but still make some really amazing creations, and make this more of a contest about just the things that are made rather than the people who are entering it. Anyway, we'll all see who is going to win the contest and how this project ends up. I'm going to release the final cinematic video later today, and at some point in the future I think the results are going to be known 1 week after the deadline. I'll let you guys know how I did in the contest and whether I won it or not. So thank you guys for watching this so far, and I hope you guys stick around for the final cinematic POV video.